Chapter 41. Politics. You are listening at novelfull.audio. If you are interested in reading 10 chapters ahead, go check out my Patreon with the link https://www.patreon.com/lazysagedao, or just type in my writer's name in the website. The plot is getting exciting there, and you guys can support me in any way you can. Additionally, go read my other novel, Journey of the Fate-Destroying Emperor, and join the Discord. https://discord.gg/pnsestipy underscore 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 underscore. After finishing his demonstration, Edward let all the students begin to practice homogeneous double enchantments. Since they had already learned how to do only one enchantment, the first step was quite easy and straightforward. However, once they tried to write the second one, a conflict erupted that actually destroyed the first one, rendering their previous efforts. What's worse is the fact that after a few failures, the piece of metal that they used to place enchantments on was destroyed, and they had to get another one. It was then some students realized how much money and material is needed in order for one person to become a qualified alchemist. Without the proper wealth and resources, it is impossible for a wizard from an ordinary family to become an alchemist unless they are extremely talented. And even then, talent could only reduce the resources wasted. After a few students had failed many times, Edward started to walk around the classroom to give pointers. He pointed out that both enchantments need to be precise, the amount of magic power used must be the exact same, and the written incantations must have as few mistakes as possible. As a matter of fact, the closer both of them are, the better the enchantments would be. As such, in order to become a qualified alchemist, not only do you need to have great control of magic powers, but also have steady hands like surgeons. As a matter of fact, there was a reason that Edward let the class try many times by themselves before giving them pointers. He wanted to see whether there were any genius alchemists among the students, and there were, the Weasley twins. Of all the students in the class, their performances were actually the best. As a matter of fact, they had the best performance of all the years that he taught. Due to the fact that there has been no alchemy class for countless years, Edward had to teach all the years, 3rd.7th, the same thing. However, due to the fact that the higher years have more knowledge and practice of magic, the pace of the class was faster. An example of that is the fact that 7th-year students already have the current content of this class. Edward was not that surprised by the twins' talents, as he knew from the canon timeline that they indeed had a rare talent for alchemy, as they built their own joke item shop. Edward always admired the twins' wild and crazy imagination, so he decided to give them extra guidance during class as to further nurture their talents. Who knows, maybe they might help him in the future, or one of their crazy ideas might inspire him one day. After a few hours, class time soon came to an end, and the students wondered how time passed so quickly. When they are in Professor Snape's class, they feel like they spent eons there. However, when they are enjoying themselves in Professor Bones' class, every time seems to end too quickly. Scene break. All the students had just walked out of Edward's class and were talking with one another with a happy smile on their faces. The class today was quite fun. I felt like Elle learned a lot. Me too, who knew that alchemy would be such an interesting and useful class. After making my first protection badge, I won a duel with a friend of mine who did not want to take Professor Bones' class because of what he said at the beginning of the year. Me too, I won a few duels with my badge. Forget about the duels. Did anyone take notice of how much galleons was wasted on all the materials we used today in class? You are right. If we add on all the ones wasted on all the other classes, how much is galleons? Humph, this is what I hate about you all Muggle-born wizards, all of you have low visions, suddenly said a Slytherin student. Adrian Pusey, what do you mean by that? Adrian Pusey gave these students that were talking about the cost of the materials of the alchemy class a disdainful look. All you people care about is the cost of the class material, but failed to realize the true valuable thing of that class. Knowledge. According to my mother, the alchemy book that we are using for class contains some of the most secret and valuable knowledge about alchemy that even some of the most ancient pure-blood families envy and drooled after. However, Professor Bones is willing to give them for free. Adrian is right, added another Slytherin student. I heard that many of the pure-blood family from Sacred 20.8 have written to Dumbledore and the Board of Governors and complained that such knowledge should not be taught at school. Luckily, the Bones family.as one of the members have many allies on the board, and with the support of the headmaster, the complaints of these families were ignored. The Muggle-born students were shocked after hearing this, as they did not know that so many political dramas occurred over one class. It was not just them who did not know about this, many other pure-blood or magical families did not know any of this. Of course now, the entire school will soon hear about such juicy gossip. Scene break. Back in the classroom, after class was over, Edward was resting at his desk reading a book when he noticed something approaching him. After raising his head, he saw a Patronus charm in the shape of a phoenix appearing in front of him. It opened its mouth and spoke. "Professor Bones, if your class is over, please come see me in my office. The password is Sherbet Lemon. Underscore 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 Noel.n. If you are not interested in my patron. On, you can just skip the paragraph that talk about it, so there is no need to complain in the comment. I am not the only writer who does this, and it's not like I place it right in the middle of the story like a TV advertisement. TikTok Harry Potter joke. What did the wizard say to the Muggle? He said, "Hey girl, why don't you meet me outside of Diagon Alley? You can play with my time turner and you'll feel like I'm in two places at once." From the next chapter on, the chapters will be longer. At least 1100 words. Chapter 42. Discussion in the headmaster's office. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. If you are interested in reading 10 chapters ahead, go check out my Patreon with the link https://www.patreon.com/lazysagedao, or just type in my writer's name in the website. The plot is getting exciting there and you guys can support me in any way you can. Additionally, go read my other novel, Journey of the Fate-Destroying Emperor, and join the Discord. https://discord.gg/princesstapy. Underscore 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 underscore. Edward went into the headmaster tower and used the password to enter the office. Upon his entrance, he did not see the professor but heard him rummaging through something on the back. Instead of sitting and waiting for him, Edward approached Fawkes and used the charm Nature's voice to talk to the phoenix. "We had a deal, now it's time for you to hold your end of the bargain." "Fine, since you fulfilled your end through my Christmas present, you can have as many bottles of blood you want," replied Fawkes. As he was a phoenix with a sense of honor, he would not go back on his words. Edward nodded, then proceeded to take a large syringe and a few crystal bottles. He then drew a lot of blood from the phoenix. Unfortunately for him, by the time he finished, he realized that he may have gone overboard. Fawkes had turned pale, his red and gold feathers had lost most of their lusters. He became thin, and by the looks of it, he seemed to be about to be reborn again. Knowing that he was a little too zealous, Edward hurried to take out a few bottles of potion from the little sack he had hanging on his waist. After making sure that Fawkes was all right, Edward sighed in relief, then he looked at the headmaster that was sitting on his chair and said, "Sorry about that. It's fine, since Fawkes said that you could get his blood, then he has to deal with the repercussions of his words." Fawkes then looked at Dumbledore for a brief moment, then ignored him as he went back to rest and recuperated. "Professor, so how was your holiday?" asked Edward, trying to make small talk. "Enjoyable. I quite like the candy you gifted me. Each one of them had a different flavor based on emotions. Personally, I did not like the one that tasted like grief. Well, you're not the only one. My cousin Susan sent me a letter complaining that she did not like both the grief and fear one. Well, it is understandable given her age. So, Edward, how was your holiday? Did you spend time with any special someone? A lady perhaps? Well, a few. That made sense. You were quite promiscuous when you were in school. I prefer the term romantic, Professor. While the two were having their little chat, Dumbledore had already used his wand to order tea and sweets for the two of them. After finishing his food, Dumbledore took a deep look at Edward. Are you going to use bloodline modification to break the limiter? Limiter? Asked Edward after taking a sip of his tea. Although he had an inkling of what the professor was talking about, he was not sure. Knowledge about the limiter is very ancient, and almost lost in modern times. I have only learned about it from Nico. You should be aware of the magic core theory. Edward nodded as he knew that his discovery of the magic core was not a unique development. Many of the ancient books that he has read have mentioned it, however, most wizards in modern times do not believe it is real. As a wizard continues to age, his magic power will continue to grow until his magic core reaches a limit, the limiter. Most wizards will spend most of their time not being able to reach the limit of their magic cores, while a few talented ones will do so in their later years. Only a rare few of them will actually reach this limit in their youth, like me, Tom, you and an old friend of mine. He must mean Grindelwald. And this so-called limiter was probably the shackle I felt after my magic power reached 25 times that of an adult wizard. Secretly thought Edward, while still calmly drinking his tea. Professor, could you elaborate on this limiter? Well, from what I understand, there should be 3 limiters. Currently, you are facing the first limiter. Once you succeed, your magic power will reach the same level as me. According to Nico, he believed that some of the founders of Hogwarts like Rowena Ravenclaw and Salazar Slytherin have broken the second limiter. As for the third one, we believe that probably only Merlin and Morgan Le Fay had breached it, however, the proof we have is very scarce. Edward started thinking to himself. If what the professor said is true, then the first limiter provides magic power between 25.50 times that of an adult wizard. The second limiter between 50.75, while the third 75.100. However, Voldemort had a magic power of 60 times that of an adult wizard. Could he have broken the second limiter? However, after a quick review of the Dark Lord's memories, he realized that this was not the case. Voldemort only broke the first limiter, but forcibly expanded his magic core through the energy created by splitting his soul. This is the reason that his magic power could not reach the full 75 times. Professor, something does not add up. Godric Gryffindor was known as a very powerful duelist that has never lost a match. How come he is not in the list of people who broke the second limiter? Edward, you have to understand that breaking a limiter merely increases a wizard's magical powers. A truly powerful wizard is based on their knowledge, skills, and use of charms and spells. A large amount of magic power is not worth anything if the person does not know how to use it. Edward nodded as he agreed with the professor's words. As a person with a vast amount of knowledge about magic, Edward truly understood the meaning of these words. For example, just his versatility in a battle is enough to make any wizard have a headache. In a duel, he could use ordinary charms, he could use elemental magic, spatial magic, or even necromancy. Most ordinary wizards can only use a few charms proficiently. Professor, if you do not mind me asking, how did you break your limiter? According to his speculation, Grindelwald most likely used the Elder Wand to break his, and he already knew how Voldemort broke his. Since Nicholas Flamel knew about the limiters and told Dumbledore, he must have broken through it as well. So, Edward speculated that he must have either used the Philosopher's Stone, or his long life resulted in him breaking it naturally. As for Dumbledore, Edward speculated that he might have used Fawkes as a way to do it. However, he was not entirely sure. N. I know that this limiter thing looks a little like cultivation, but I promise it is not. I am just using it as a way to show the strength of certain characters, and to show Edward's magical growth and progress throughout the early stage of the story. Underscore 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 HP pick dot upline. Have you heard of Platform 9 and March 4th? Well, I can think of something else with the exact same measurements. Chapter 43. Ravenclaw's Greed for Knowledge. You are listening at novelfull.audio. If you are interested in reading 10 chapters ahead, go check out my Patreon with the link https://www.patreon.com/lazysagedao, or just type in my writer's name in the website. The plot is getting exciting there, and you guys can support me in any way you can. Additionally, go read my other novel, Journey of the Fate-Destroying Emperor, and join the Discord. https://discord.gg/princesstapy. Underscore 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 underscore. How I did it, said Dumbledore slowly. Simple, with practice. Practice. Yes, practice. The magic core is similar to a muscle of the body. With repeated practice and training, it will eventually get stronger, even to the point of breaking the first limiter. Wouldn't that take a lot of time? Asked Edward. Not really, replied the professor, who placed a piece of cake in his mouth. With the right method, the time can be greatly reduced. Edward nodded, but he did not say anything further. He could guess that the professor wanted him to ask so that he could use his method instead of the bloodline modification one. However, he would not ask. Edward as a transmigrator who has read all the Harry Potter books and movies knew that it was not a simple thing to be in favor of Dumbledore. Whether it was Newt Scamander or Harry Potter, both of them went to a lot of trouble just because of being Dumbledore's protege or something similar. As a matter of fact, no one that is truly close to Dumbledore has ever had a good fate. Let's look at Snape. The poor guy spent more than 6 years looking over and protecting the son of the person he loves most in the world, and the person he hates most in the world. All under Dumbledore's order. Of course, this could be argued that it was Snape's decision after all. However, the man has done so many things against his will while working as a double agent for Dumbledore. Edward will never forget the scene in the movie when Dumbledore told Snape that Harry Potter had to die, and Voldemort had to be the one to kill him. He was both angry and devastated. No matter how eloquent people argued for Dumbledore, it does not change the fact he used Snape's love for Lily to force him to protect Harry Potter. Then there is the Flamel couple. Although according to the canon timeline, it was their decision to give up the Philosopher's Stone, Edward did not believe for a second that Dumbledore did not take any part in convincing them to do so, and doing it so easily. So, it does not matter whether the professor was hinting at him to ask him about the way to break the limiter. He did not want to owe him any more debt after all the alchemy knowledge that he even thought he was just trying to prevent him from studying the dark arts. Despite his rejection of this offer, Edward still lusted after Dumbledore's knowledge, and not just the ones about the limiter, but all of them. He wanted to sign the same contract he did with Voldemort and acquire all the knowledge of the greatest white wizard of modern time. And not just him, but Grindelwald's too. However, he knew that this was not an easy task. Dumbledore was a man of great will and would never sign such a contract, especially when he was wary of Edward being the third-generation Dark Lord after Grindelwald and Voldemort. Even if Edward were to try to threaten him, he could see that the headmaster would not budge an inch. As a person who is willing to sacrifice anyone and even his own life for the greater good of the wizarding world, Edward did not believe that such a person would be willing to bend their own ideologies and beliefs. This is one reason that he did not try to make a deal with the professor with the bargain of bringing his sister back to life. Of course, Edward has not given up trying yet. He just has to find the right way. And he also will try to get Grindelwald to sign the contract first before trying with Dumbledore. However, he will only do so after he finishes his body modification. Without being on the same level of these powerful wizards, he will not easily try to make deals with them. So, Professor, why did you call me to your office? Asked Edward in order to change the subject. Although Dumbledore was a little disappointed that Edward did not ask for his help, he did not show it on his face. Well, Harry told me that he lent you an invisible cloak during Christmas break, and he asked me to get it back for him if you are finished with it, replied Dumbledore with a calm look on his face. Noel.n. Oh, thank you for the reminder, Professor, otherwise, I would have forgotten, replied Edward calmly. Then, he took out the fake cloak that he made from his bag and gave it to the professor. After taking the invisibility cloak, he gave it a quick check. He could tell that some of the mysterious power inside of it had greatly diminished, but he guessed that it must have been due to Edward's research. So, did you figure out what it was? Asked the professor. Of course. As a grand alchemist, I can easily notice the difference between a regular invisible cloak and a deathly hallow. So, what do you think about death? After pondering for a brief moment, Edward responded. A truly powerful being, an unimaginable being. If one day he decided to do something to the wizard world, I doubt that even if Merlin were to be alive, he could do something to stop him. We would be like helpless children. There is no need to worry about such a thing. Death is nothing but a natural part of this world. Just like ancient magic. Edward nodded, but he did not agree with Dumbledore's words. According to his last discussion, he could tell that death has human emotions. As long as someone has emotions, then they will have desires. If one day Death decided that he had enough of following the rules that restricted him, if he decided to find a way to either break those rules or find a loophole on them, what is to stop him from doing so? No one. So, Edward will not let his guards down when it comes to Death and continue to study him until he can create a contingency plan for him in case he decides to go rogue. If all his plans go right, Edward can foresee that he and his family will live a long life. So, he might live to the day that Death decided to go rogue. After handing the cloak to Dumbledore, they chatted for a while before Edward left. As for Dumbledore, he continued to study the cloak and make sure that there was nothing wrong with it. After all, he had it for many years before he gave it back to Harry. Underscore 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 HP pickup line. I'd like you to stick your Sorcerer's Stone into my Chamber of Secrets and release the Prisoner of Azkaban into my Goblet of Fire, giving the Order of the Phoenix and making your Half-Blood Prince rise and give me the Deathly Hallows. Guys, why don't I see any of you talking to me in the Discord? Most of the people there are most talking about my other novel. I have already picked the first world and it's Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. So go there to ask me question or feed me new ideas for the upcoming new world. Chapter 44. Room of Requirement. You are listening at novelfull.audio. If you are interested in reading 10 chapters ahead, go check out my Patreon with the link https://www.patreon.com/lazysagedao, or just type in my writer's name in the website. The plot is getting exciting there and you guys can support me in any way you can. Additionally, go read my other novel, Journey of the Fate-Destroying Emperor, and join the Discord. https://discord.gg/bnsestipy. Underscore 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 underscore. After leaving the headmaster's office, Edward realized that he did not have class for the rest of the day. So, he went to the Room of Requirement. Midway through his journey, he met Helena and he invited her to accompany him. Helena, do you remember your mother mentioning something about a magic referred to as limiter? Limiter. Yes, I remember that she did mention it briefly. From what I remember, my mother and Uncle Salazar were the best at this kind of magic. However, she only briefly mentioned and told me she would explain everything in detail when the time was right. Unfortunately, the time was never right. It's all right now, said Edward after seeing the sadness in her face. Then, the two of them entered the room of requirement. After choosing his research room that he designed personally, he entered. After Edward entered the room, Edward started to reminisce about the past. He remembered all the amazing time he had in this room during his time in school, he remembered all the knowledge that he learned, and he also remembered all the time he spent studying the enchantments of this room. When he started to study dark magic, he tried to sneak into the restricted area. However, Dumbledore always stopped him. The headmaster Ivern placed powerful enchantments on the library that specifically detected his presence. And all the teachers were not allowed to give him a pass. Edward spent a lot of time studying that enchantment. Unfortunately for him, every time he came close to crack it, Dumbledore would either improve it or change it to a different one. Angered, he tried to use the room of requirement to give a room full of all the books of the restricted area, however, this plan failed too. It was then that he discovered that as the headmaster, Dumbledore had some level of control over the room of requirement. So, Edward could not get access to the books in the restricted area. Of course, he did not give up trying. Although he knew that he could not bypass the enchantment, he used the opportunity to challenge himself and learn from the experience. By the time he graduated, he still did not reach the level of passing Dumbledore's enchantment. This was one of the main reasons that Edward decided to become an international thief and steal all those knowledge after graduation. He realized that no matter how talented he was, no matter how much revolutionary research that he had succeeded in, it did not change the fact that Dumbledore had more than 100 years of knowledge and skill ahead of him. And if he wants to catch up and surpass him, he will either need a lot of time, or vast quantities of knowledge. So, he chose the latter without hesitation. Edward at the beginning of the year was more knowledgeable than Dumbledore, not to mention him now who also has all the knowledge of Voldemort. The only thing holding him back is his lack of magic power in his magic core. After entering the room of requirement, Edward had two goals or purpose. One was to use all his current understanding of alchemy to finally understand how the room was made. The second and main objective was to study Rowena Ravenclaw's diadem. As a matter of fact, according to Helena, both of these things were created by the same person. Her mother. From what Edward learned from her, Rowena was truly an unimaginably powerful witch. Both according to ancient and modern times. Like Edward, she believed in pursuing the essence of magic, and had little to no taboo when it comes to doing research. Helena often mentioned how similar the two of them were, and Edward wished that he had met her. He has always been interested in the diadem that can make someone smarter, so he studied it greatly. Due to being turned into a Horcrux, a lot of the enchantments of the diadem were broken. So, Edward had to seal the soul of Voldemort's inside of it before he could study it, however it was no use until now. With the knowledge of the Dark Lord, he can perfectly remove the soul from the diadem without damaging it. Then, he can study this magnificent piece of alchemy artifact to the fullest. Scene break. Inside the Hufflepuff common room. All the Hufflepuff students were surrounding two people while cheering. One person was a young man, while the other was a little girl. The young man had a blue-eyed white dragon next to him, and two cards that were facing down. As for the girl, she had 3 monsters standing next to her. Despite being mere holograms made through magic, all these monsters looked so real that it was almost impossible to tell apart. As for these two people, they were Cedric Diggory and Susan Bones, and they both were playing dual monster cards. As soon as he left class, he rushed to challenge Susan in order to acquire the reward that Professor Bones offered. Susan looked at Cedric with a smile before saying, "I have to say, Cedric, you are probably one of the very few good duelists in the wizarding world. Unfortunately for you, beside my cousin, no one can beat me at this game." "Susan, there is no need to brag, I have not lost the game yet." "Not even close," replied Cedric with a somber look on his face. He had spent the whole vacation going over countless combinations of the cards in his deck. He read the UGI.O comics over and over in order to learn different strategies. So, he did not believe that he would lose. By now, you should know the meaning of the heart of the cards, suddenly asked Susan. Yes, so what? Asked Cedric with a frown. Do you know that this is an actual thing in dueling? What? That's impossible, replied Cedric, and he was not the only one who reacted that way. All the other Hufflepuff students did too. Although they were all fans of Duel Monster and Yugi Muto, they knew that the concept of the hearts of the cards was nothing more than something from a comic. That's where you are wrong, answered little Susan with a smile. When my cousin developed the latest generation of dueling disc, he used a particular magic enchantment that allowed a duelist to draw the cards that they wanted. As long as their will and beliefs were enough. I remember he was very proud about it and bragged to me in a 10-page letter about his accomplishment. After learning about this, I spent many months training under his consultation to achieve that level. After saying that, Susan smiled and drew a card. After seeing it, her smile increased even more. I sacrificed the 3 monsters in the field in order to summon my Egyptian god card Obelisk the Tormentor. The 3 monsters that were around her dispersed into specks of light, then a gigantic blue monster with wings appeared in the common room. All the students were first shocked that she actually drew the card she wanted. According to dueling rules, all decks have to be shuffled properly before any game. More importantly, all the students suddenly felt a spiritual pressure that enveloped them after Obelisk showed up. It was like a mighty god that was watching them. They all felt fear and reverence at the same time. They wanted to bow down and worship this mighty being. Obviously Edward used some kind of spiritual magic to emulate the presence of a god, hence the reason that all the students felt the way they did. As a matter of fact, he wanted to use his understanding of the Sorting Hat to make all 3 Egyptian cards have some sort of sentience, but he gave up that idea after a prototype he made actually attacked him to determine if he was worthy to have it. Although the spiritual magic that the winged dragon of Ra used to attack him back then was nothing to him, this could not be the same for other ordinary wizards. Especially children. Back to the Hufflepuff common room, after Susan summoned such a powerful card, Cedric did not stand a chance in this match. His blue-white dragon along with all his remaining cards in the field were instantly destroyed, and he lost the game. As for Susan, from that day on, she became the rising star of Hufflepuff. And soon, the entire school. Sorry, I did not release a chapter yesterday, but I was sick the past few days and did not feel like writing yesterday. The only reason that I wrote for my other novel was because I am contractually obligated. Chapter 45. The Diadem. You are listening at novelfull.audio. If you are interested in reading 10 chapters ahead, go check out my Patreon with the link https://www.patreon.com/lazysagedao, or just type in my writer's name in the website. The plot is getting exciting there and you guys can support me in any way you can. Additionally, go read my other novel, Journey of the Fate-Destroying Emperor, and join the Discord. https://discord.gg/pnsestapy. Inside the Room of Requirement. Edward had just finished studying the diadem after removing the soul of Voldemort from it and storing it in another object. Although he technically has not slept for a few days, he still had a powerful vigor. This kind of situation was normal for him as he is used to spending months without end when studying things that he is interested in. Of course he has developed potions that have provided his body with the nutrition needed and his spirit at all-time high. Your mother was truly an unimaginably powerful witch, said Edward with fascination after comprehending the enchantments on the diadem. Many people have said similar things. She was not only the most powerful witch of her time, but probably one of the very best throughout history, replied Helena, who was standing not far from Edward with a complicated look on her face. I am sure she loved you very much. Maybe you are right, but that does not change the fact that she did not spend any of her time with me. Between all her magic research and running Hogwarts, I barely saw her except for when she was teaching me. Edward sighed after hearing this. He knew that ghosts stayed in the world of the living for two reasons. Afraid of death or unfinished business. As for Helena, it was unfinished business. She wanted to see her mother again and gained her forgiveness for her past transgression, and she also wanted to voice all the wrongdoings that she suffered during her childhood. This was one of the reasons that she stole the diadem. Not just because she was jealous of her mother's intelligence and importance, she wanted to gain such intelligence in order to make certain achievements as a witch, then gained her attention. She wanted to have a real relationship with her, even if it was through magic. Edward sighed but did not mention this topic again. However, he promised to find a way to help her in the future if he can. Living as a ghost is like a curse, no one should live like that unless it is of their willingness to escape death. Edward then focused on his recent finding. This diadem is a piece of art when it comes to alchemy. It grants the user the power of accelerated thought process. When someone puts it on, all their thought processes, calculation ability, and processing speed will dramatically increase. In simple words, the user will begin to function like a computer, being able to process information at an unnatural fast rate. It is the perfect tool for understanding and researching magic. Edward's mind started to race and thinking about how much of a great help this diadem will be to his research after he recreated his own. And he has many ideas on how to improve it. For once, he can enchant his version to allow himself to enter an emotionless state of mind. A state of mind where all distracting thoughts and emotions are removed. That way, it can further increase his processing ability by removing so many variables. It was like turning himself into an AI machine. He called this spell Mechanized Mind. Another advantage of this spell is the fact that it can remove or negate the power of dark arts in a wizard's mind. It is common knowledge that when a wizard constantly studies the dark arts, it can slowly start to influence their minds, making them more moody, dark, and cruel. Even Edward is not immune to such a thing. This is one of the reasons that he has to constantly use his Patronus charm to absorb positive emotions after doing dark arts research, otherwise his personality will slowly change. With this new spell, everything will change. The dark arts cannot change or influence an emotionless robot, so it will also prove ineffective against the mechanized mind. Time passed, and Edward started making his own diadem. However, he still changed the design to be more suited for man. Of course, all his other research continued as well. Although he was a little stretched thin with all the different research he had to do, he still focused on the life code. By the end of the year, he should be prepared to modify his own body after a few experiments on other test subjects. Scene break. Inside Hagrid hut, Hermione, Harry, Ron, and Hagrid were watching the process of an egg cracking. Soon, a small winged creature appeared from the bronze egg. It looked around with its small eyes, surveying the surroundings. "Is that a dragon?" asked Ron. "Yes," replied Hagrid with a smile on his face. My brother Charlie raises dragons in Romania." "Is that so?" replied Hagrid while admiring the creature. "I've always wanted to raise a dragon ever since I saw Edward's dragon." "Professor Bones has a dragon?" asked Harry with a little intrigued look on his face. "Oh yes, and not just dragons. He has a Thunderbird, Swooping Evil, Niffler, Fwooper, Giants, and Zowoo. As a matter of fact, he has a suitcase that has basically most of the magical animals in the wizarding world. Him and Newt Scamander always used to compete on who has the most animals and who raises them the best. The only two animals that he does not have are a phoenix and a basilisk. However, this year, he told me that he was tracking a phoenix and is on the verge of catching one." "What is a basilisk?" asked Hermione. She has read the book, Fantastic Beast and Where to Find Them, and remembers most of the animals that Hagrid mentioned, but she has never heard of a basilisk. "I do not know much about it except that it is a very powerful snake and was created by a powerful dark wizard. However, basilisks have been extinct for countless years. According to Edward and the wizarding world's knowledge, the way to create a basilisk is to hatch a chicken egg under a toad. However, after trying this method, Edward realized that things were not so simple as he failed to actually create a basilisk. So, he thought of catching the one inside the Chamber of Secrets and studying it next year. Hermione nodded before saying, "Unfortunately, you cannot keep it." "Why?" "According to wizarding law, it is illegal for a wizard to keep and raise dragons without the proper permit." "Do you have a permit for it?" "No," replied Hagrid with his head lowered. "So, you cannot keep it." "But it is so small. It needs my protection before it can survive on its own. Plus no one has to know." "If you do not want to get both you and Professor Dumbledore in trouble, then you cannot keep the dragon," insisted Hermione. Hagrid sighed, but did not say anything more on the matter. But Ron suddenly asked, "How do you know about wizarding law?" "After what Professor Bones said during the first-year entrance ceremony about inequality and discrimination, I went to read about the law to see whether he was right." "So, what was the result?" asked Harry. "He was right," replied Hermione, rendering the room quiet for a while. "So, what am I supposed to do now?" asked Hagrid. "Didn't you say that Professor Edward had many dragons?" replied Hermione. "Asked him if he could help. Underscore 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 So I found that I have writer's block and do not know how to properly end the Harry Potter world, so I rewatched the movies starting with Fantastic Beasts. The scene where countless wizards work together to fix the entire city of New York had me thinking about whether Edward should conquer and unify the wizarding world. In that case, if one day he decided to invade or conquer another world to get what he wants, he will have thousands of wizards at his beck and call. What do you guys think?" Chapter 46. Higher Magical Universe. You are listening at novelfull.audio. If you are interested in reading 10 chapters ahead, go check out my Patreon with the link https://www.patreon.com/lazysagedao, or just type in my writer's name in the website. The plot is getting exciting there and you guys can support me in any way you can. Additionally, go read my other novel, Journey of the Fate-Destroying Emperor, and join the Discord. https://discord.gg/bnsestapy. Underscore 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 One day while Edward was inside his own classroom reviewing the students' work, an owl came through the window and handed him a letter. After feeding the bird, he opened the letter. The letter came from Hagrid asking to come meet him in his hut as he had something important to ask. The letter also mentioned that it was urgent. After reading the letter, Edward could more or less guess the reason for Hagrid asking to see him. According to the canon timeline, this should be around the time that he received his dragon. After packing his belongings, he headed there to meet the half-giant who had a deep love for magical animals. On the way there, Edward first encountered Quirrell, who was still acting like a stuttering buffoon. The two of them pretended like they did not know each other and passed by one another like they were strangers. The second person that Edward encountered was the ghost of the Slytherin house, the Bloody Baron. "Edward Bones," said the Baron. "What you are doing is wrong and you should stop." "And what am I doing wrong, Mr. Baron?" "Your relationship with Helena is wrong. The living and the dead should not be together, this is taboo and wrong. I am warning you to leave her alone. Otherwise suffer the consequences." Edward gave him a deep look before saying, "And I am guessing that this warning of yours has nothing to do with your affection, nay, your obsession with her, right?" "I do not know what you are talking about." "But heed my warning," replied the Baron with a cold look on his face. "And if I don't, what can you do? Although I cannot do anything to a powerful wizard like yourself, I can still haunt you. Everywhere you go, I will be there. When you try to sleep, I will wake you in order to continue to haunt you. Anyway, us ghosts do not have the need or desire to rest." The Bloody Baron had spent quite some time coming with this threat. He knew that few charms or spells could actually work on ghosts. Although there was some dark magic that still worked on them, those were very rare and were also temporary. So, he did not have much to fear. Edward looked at the Baron with a smirk on his face, then he snapped his finger. A dark and creepy flame appeared on his hand. The Baron immediately backed away after seeing it. While looking at the flame, Edward said, "This flame is called Demon Flame, summoned from another dimension. The method used by wizards to become ghosts is to live an imprint of themselves in the living world after their deaths, thus being able to exist in such a form. As a result of this, all of you take a non-corporeal form that is immune to most magic. Unfortunately for you, Baron, this flame can instantly erase your imprint that exists in this world and kill you. What's worse, after you die again, you will not enter the afterlife like everyone else, but cease to exist in this mortal coil." The expression of the Baron became distorted, he gave a deep look at Edward before flying away. Meanwhile, Edward was looking at this flame while secretly sighing. He learned this dark magic from the book, The Key of Solomon. Both, The Lesser Key of Solomon, and The Key of Solomon, are books that Edward stole from the Vatican, and they both talked about how to summon demons and control them. Additionally, there is some demonic magic related to them. Unfortunately, after countless trial and error, Edward discovered that he could only summon a few very weak demons and nothing more. At first he thought that it was either a problem with him or the magic itself, but after investigation, he realized that he was wrong. Just like there is a separate dimension for the afterlife where death exists and rules over, Edward also discovered a dimension where demons exist. And that is where these summoned demons came from. Unfortunately, he could not enter that dimension just like he did for death no matter what he tried. Even worse, no other powerful demons could also be summoned in the material world. So, these two books were seriously nerfed. After that experiences, Edward theorized that the Harry Potter universe might have been extremely powerful at some point of time, but for some reason, was reduced by several reasons. Of course Edward does not have much evidence beside the existence of death to support his theory, but he still thinks that there might be some truth to his theory. After all, when you compare the capability of ordinary wizards to the existence of things like the Philosopher's Stone, Ravenclaw's diadem, the Horcrux magic, and even the resurrection magic that Voldemort used in the cemetery, these discrepancies are too large to ignore. While thinking about these things, Edward soon arrived at Hagrid's hut. Scene break. Edward was sitting inside the hut, accompanied by Hagrid and the Gryffindors trio. He looked at the little dragon while playing with it. Unlike when it was with Hagrid, the little dragon was as docile as a cat in front of Edward. "How did you do that?" asked Hagrid with a look of excitement and envy on his face. And he was not the only one impressed. "I will teach about this some other time." "So, what do you call it?" asked Edward, fully knowing the answer. "Norbert. His name is Norbert." "Well, it should be Norberta as it is female," replied Edward. And the reason he knew this was not just because he previously read the Harry Potter book, but because he had an extensive knowledge about magical beasts. "It's a she?" asked Ron in surprise. In fact, even Hagrid was a little surprised. After everyone calmed down, Hermione then said, "Professor, Hagrid cannot keep the dragon, so we were wondering if there was anything that you could do to help. Like maybe find a place for him or get him a permit to raise legally." However, Edward did not answer her, instead he was staring deeply at Norberta. This lasted for a few minutes before Hagrid woke him up from his deep thinking. "What did you guys say?" asked Edward. However, no one responded to him immediately. Instead Hermione asked, "Professor, what were you thinking about so deeply?" "Oh, I was thinking about creating a real dragon." "A real dragon? What do you mean by that?" asked Ron. His brother raised dragons for a living, so he was quite familiar with different types of dragon, but he had never heard of real dragons. According to Muggle stories, the dragons we have in the wizarding world are wyvern. Which are inferior species of dragons. Real dragons are majestic creatures that are a few hundred meters tall, and have a wingspan of 1,000 feet. They do not just breathe fire, but have their own system of magic, usually based on a special language called Dragon Chant, explained Edward. That sounds so terrifying, said Ron. That would be such a cute creature, said Hagrid at the same time. Both Hermione and Harry were from the Muggle world, so they have heard of similar stories. So, Hermione asked. You said it yourself, Professor, these were stories. So, how could you possibly create such a creature? Underscore 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 underscore. So it is decided, Edward will conquer the world. As for the people who argued that he is a loner who pursued doing research, you have to understand that having many people helping doing the lesser research would save him a lot of time. Of course I understand that Edward will have to make sure that some wizards are loyal to him, and guide them to change their mindset. On top of that, he will have a special team made of the best and most talented witch and wizard of the Harry Potter world to help in his research. And I will make sure to take into account the person's morality and camp before deciding what research they will do in the future. Chapter 47. After class lesson you are listening at novelfull.audio. If you are interested in reading 10 chapters ahead, go check out my Patreon with the link https://www.patreon.com/lazysagedao, or just type in my writer's name in the website. The plot is getting exciting there and you guys can support me in any way you can. Additionally, go read my other novel, Journey of the Fate-Destroying Emperor, and join the Discord. https://discord.gg/princesstapy. Underscore 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 underscore, simple, replied Edward calmly. By purifying the bloodline of current modern time dragons and seeing if their ancestors were real dragons spoken in the stories. Even if I were to fail, then I would still like to see what a dragon would turn into after his bloodline is purified. Magic can do such a thing? Asked Hermione. I have never heard of any book that mentions such a thing. Edward looked at her deeply before answering. Miss Granger, magic is a very powerful and mysterious force with unlimited possibility. The only limit of magic is us, the users. After saying that, Edward paused for a moment before saying something else. Miss Granger, let me give you a piece of advice. If you think that by just memorizing all the things in the book that you can become a great wizard, then you are truly mistaken. Truly powerful wizards like me or Dumbledore are like Muggle scientists. We look at magic through curiosity and observation. Have any of you ever asked yourselves these questions? What is magic? Where did it come from? Why can wizards be born with magic while Muggles are not? Is it some form of energy, or something else? Why is it that some people are born with special talents while others are not? Why is it that some animals are born with magic while others are not? There are so many unanswered and unexplored things that us wizards do not understand, but the problem is the fact no one but few are actually asking these kinds of questions. Now, I know that all of you are a bunch of first years and the number of charms that most of you can use can be counted in one hand, but it is never too late to start asking these questions, then try to find the answer later on. Although the majority of these people in the shack were young, all of them were extraordinary in some way, and each had somewhat of a different response. Beside the shared shock or surprise. Both Harry and Hermione were raised with Muggle ideology, so they can understand the concept of scientists exploring the unknown by asking questions. Despite this, their initial reaction or thinking differed after this. Harry Potter just thought that Edward was amazing, however, he did not think further about such a thing. He did not have good grades in science class, so he did not really care about these questions that Edward asked. The same could be said for Hagrid. The only thing still in his mind after the initial shock was whether Edward could actually create a real dragon with the same physical features that he previously mentioned. Ron.as a person who grew up in the magical world. Asked himself for a brief moment why he never heard anyone. Including his father. Talked about these questions Edward asked. For a brief moment, he asked himself whether it was something that only dark wizards did. Of course the person who was affected the most by these words were in fact Miss Hermione Granger herself. She realized that she has been looking at magic the wrong way. She thought that magic was this mysterious and secretive thing, but she should have been looking at it through the lens of a scientist. She should have been asking all types of questions. Of course Edward as a powerful legimens could tell what all these people were thinking with just a glance. Although he usually does not have the habit of spying on people's thoughts, he occasionally does so. "Professor, how would we go about answering those questions?" asked Hermione with a newfound vigor in her voice. "Well, let me show you," he replied. "First, I'd like you to use a spell any of them can do." After hesitating for a while, Hermione took out her wand and said, "Lumos." Then the tip of her wand lit up. Edward nodded before asking, "Now, let me ask, why do you need to use an incantation when using a charm?" It is widespread knowledge that some wizards can use nonverbal spells. Hermione raised her eyebrow as she began to think about all the knowledge she had read before. "I remember that in a book, it said that wizards have something called magic power inside of them, and that it grows as a wizard gets older. This is the reason that older wizards are usually more powerful than younger ones." So, the incantation is used to mobilize the magic power inside a wizard in order to properly cast spells. Correct, Miss Granger. Now, the second step is to find the magic power inside the body. I need you to close your eyes, and cast a spell. However, do not just randomly do, but try to feel any changes that are happening inside of you. Hermione closed her eyes, then waved her wand. Lumos. However, she did not feel anything. "I did not feel anything, Professor." "It's all right, just repeat the process until you succeed." Hermione nodded and followed the guidance. "Lumos," she chanted again. She tried a few times before finally feeling a mysterious power inside her. She was in awe of it. "Only 7 tries, she is 3 tries better than little Susan," thought Edward to himself. As for him, he did not have to try. The moment that his magic rioted at the age of 6, he could feel his magic power. And soon after that, he discovered his magic core. For Edward, magic has always been like an extra limb that he can use or wield in any ways that he sees fit. Now Miss Granger, now that you have found your magic power, it's time to follow the origin or where it came from. This time, I will give you a little help. Edward then took out his wand and pointed to the place between her eyebrows. A white light flew out his wand and entered Hermione's head, then she found that all her senses were extremely sharp. Following the professor's advice, she cast the Lumos charm again, then sensed how the magic power operated inside her body. "Professor, I saw a cube inside of my heart, there seemed to be something inside of it. It seemed to be the so-called magic power." "That is the magic core," replied Edward. "And the place that holds all wizards' magic powers." Hermione was fascinated by this discovery as she started to play with her magic power. She effortlessly controlled it and cast different spells. Some spells that she found difficult to cast came so easily to her now. Unfortunately for her, after a few minutes, the spell that Edward placed on her was gone, and her senses returned to normal. Although she could still feel the magic power in her body, she could no longer find the magic core. Underscore 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 for those who might be wondering. Despite the fact that Edward decided to conquer the world, I will not spend a lot of time writing the HP world. As a matter of fact, I will not write all 7 years of Harry Potter, and there will be time skips. HP pickup line. Is that a basilisk in your pants or are you just happy to see me? Chapter 48. Bloodline. You are listening at novelfull.audio. If you are interested in reading 10 chapters ahead, go check out my Patreon with the link https://www.patreon.com/lazysagedao, or just type in my writer's name in the website. The plot is getting exciting there and you guys can support me in any way you can. Additionally, Go read my other novel, Journey of the Fate-Destroying Emperor, and join the Discord. https://discord.gg/princesstypy underscore 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 Hermione had a look of regret on her face after not being able to sense the magic cube inside her body. The ability to be able to control magic so easily was quite fascinating. However, she soon calmed down after seeing the strange and confused look that both Ron and Harry were giving her. After pondering for a while, Hermione suddenly asked. Professor, since you talked about purifying Norberta's bloodline, does that mean that the concept of bloodline actually exists? Edward gave a brief look before answering. That is correct, Ms. Granger. I have just recently discovered it myself. Then, doesn't that mean that the pureblood concept of blood supremacy is actually real? The room became silent after she asked that question, as everyone then looked at Edward. Waiting to hear his answer. Well, the answer is both yes and no. Everyone then looked at him with a look that seemed to say, "Are you playing with us? What does that even mean?" Edward smiled before explaining. After discovering the wizard's bloodline, I theorized that the ancestors of us wizard kin were ordinary muggles. But after injecting the blood of magical animals or through rituals that allowed them to share bloodline, the first wizards were created. After years of procreation, wizards have developed their unique bloodline. As a matter of fact, Edward has been doing some research on that topic. He tried to plant magical beasts' bloodline on a few muggle prisoners, but the result was a disappointment. He concluded that maybe the bloodline of modern-time magical beasts was not the same as back then. However, today he was inspired after seeing Norberta. After purifying these magic animals' bloodline, he will try to transplant it again. In one of his experiments, he even tried to remove a wizard's bloodline and planted it in a muggle, but even that also failed. Back to the topic, Edward continued to explain. As for the idea of bloodline purity, the truth of the matter is that ancient wizards probably knew that by marrying with other wizards with powerful bloodline or talent, their descendants have a higher chance of becoming talented. So they proceeded with that idea. And at a certain point, the idea of marrying to create a powerful bloodline probably became a very normal thing among wizards. However, although this process can also create powerful bloodlines, it was fatal for many wizard families, as after a few generations, their descendants would become infertile, thus ending their family's blood inheritance. As for the current pureblood family supremacists, they are nothing but a bunch of idiots that twisted the ideologies of their ancestors. None of them actually know anything about bloodlines, but use the concept in order to oppress the rising power of both half-blood and muggle-born wizards. Hermione nodded, as she was probably the only one who truly understood Edward's meaning. After pondering for a while, she then asked. Professor, what you said still proves that magical families like the Weasleys or even Harry's family will have great advantage over my family, who only awakened their bloodline in this generation. Harry quickly raised his hand before saying. I didn't even know that my family was a magical one until I came to Hogwarts, so there's probably nothing special about my bloodline. As for Ron, he raised his shoulder before also saying. There is nothing special about my family as well. All three of you are actually wrong, replied Edward calmly. All of your bloodlines are special in different ways. All of them looked at him with surprise on their faces, and Edward did not let them wait for too long before explaining. From my research, I know that the Potter family is somewhat related to the Peverell brothers. Are you talking about the ones from the Tale of the Three Brothers? Asked Ron with a surprised look on his face. His mother used to read this story to him and Ginny. Harry was also surprised, as the professor once told him about the three brothers and their encounter with death. That is correct, replied Edward. To be precise, the Potter family is related to Ignotus Peverell. Your ancestor was someone who was able to hide from death. No matter how he did it, his wisdom and cautious nature makes him a very powerful wizard. Not to mention his talent. As for the Weasley family, said Edward as he looked at Ron. "It is a very particular bloodline. Forget the fact that all of you inherited some form of talent for Quidditch. Whether it was Charlie, the twins, Ginny, or even you Ron. All of you inherited some form of it. Then there is George and Fred's talent for alchemy. Although I do not know whether it comes from their bloodline, it is worth mentioning. However, this is not the most particular part of your family bloodline. According to my research, the birth rate of most family wizards is actually very low. Most families only have one magically gifted child. If they have more, there is a high chance that some of them will be born as squibs. The highest number of magically gifted children in a wizard family is usually 3, with a few outliers. However, your Weasley family has 7 children, and not a single squib among them. That itself makes your bloodline very remarkable." While the other people were pondering about Edward's words, Ron had a genuinely surprised look on his face. He never expected that it was actually a good thing for their family to have many children, as it was seen as a burden by him. Most of the time. As a matter of fact, Edward did not lie to Ron. He was also curious about this phenomenon, so he secretly took some of his blood and studied. He discovered that the Weasleys' family bloodline was very active and was easily passed on. This is the reason that they all have magic ability and red hair. Of course, he also guessed that there was something special about Molly. However, he did not research it. According to Edward's estimate, if the Weasley were financially capable, they could create a very powerful family by birthing many children. After everybody calmed themselves down with this news, Hermione asked, "Professor, what is so special about my bloodline?" "As for you, Ms. Granger, your talent in magic is actually very high. Not only do you have almost perfect memory, you should also notice that compared to most Muggle-born wizards and even pure-blood wizards, your talent is way superior to them. In your entire year, I imagine that only my cousin Susan can probably compete with you in terms of capability. And that is because she has received intense magical training from me at a young age." After hearing this, Hermione was not happy. Instead, she had a frown on her face as the name Susan brought a lot of frustration to her. Pickup line. "You don't even have to say Lumos Maxima to turn me on." Chapter 49. The Power of Fate. You are listening at novelfull.audio. If you are interested in reading 10 chapters ahead, go check out my Patreon with the link https://www.patreon.com/lazysagedao, or just type in my writer's name in the website. The plot is getting exciting there and you guys can support me in any way you can. Additionally, go read my other novel, Journey of the Fate-Destroying Emperor, and join the Discord. https://discord.gg/princesstapy. ________________________________________________________________________________________________________________________ Throughout this entire year, Hermione has gotten perfect grades in all her classes, making her loved by all her teachers. Except for probably Snape. However, there has been one person that was always better than her, and it was Susan Bones. In the few classes that they take together, they always compete for who could answer any question raised by the professor. The thing was that Susan always had better answers than her, even if she answered the question. Hermione had noticed something different about Susan. Every time she answered a question, she would just paraphrase or repeat verbatim the things that she had read in the books. As for Susan, she can analyze any question the professors asked, and provide her own understanding. So, although the professors always liked her answer, they preferred Susan's more due to her insight. According to rumors, even Snape once complimented Susan during potion class, making her the first and only non-Slytherin to actually receive a compliment. Of course Edward does not count. Hermione has always wondered why Susan was so good at a young age. Although there were rumors that she was related to Professor Bones, many people thought it was just rumors. But it seemed that the rumors were correct. Susan was probably trained by such a powerful wizard at such a young age. No wonder she knew so much. I bet she already knew about the magic core and can control it easily, thought Hermione to herself. Professor, is there a way for me to get access to the magic core on my own? Asked Hermione with a look of expectation in her face. There is, replied Edward with a slight smile on his face. It's all about constant training in trying to sense. Every night before you go to bed, all you have to do is to constantly use a spell, then try to sense the magic core. Do this until all the magic power in your core is exhausted. This way, not only can you train to sense the core, but also train your magic core and magic power to be as flexible as possible, and also stimulate the growth of your magic power. Wait, Professor, are you saying that constant depleting of magic power and letting it regrow on its own will facilitate its growth? That wizard does not have to only rely on age to grow their magic powers, asked Hermione in shock. That is correct, Ms. Granger, replied Edward calmly. Hermione was indeed shocked as this news completely broke her worldview, and it was not just her, but everyone in this room. Even Hagrid knows that the only way that a wizard's magic can grow more powerful is through time. Now, Edward told them otherwise. After hesitating for a while, Hermione then asked. Professor, this kind of thing should be a secret, right? Shouldn't you hide for the Bones family or something? What would other families do if they knew that we knew such a secret? And why are you telling us this? Edward looked at her after she said these words. Worthy of the smartest witch of her age, not only can she see the potential benefit of this knowledge, but also the potential danger, secretly thought Edward. Well, the reasons I am telling you all this are actually very simple. For once, I do not believe that knowledge should be hidden due to being too precious. Only by sharing, communicating and exchanging can magic be further developed. Secondly, let's just say that I have a soft spot for talented wizards and witches. Whether it is you Ms. Granger, the Weasley twins, or Cedric Diggory, all you are very talented. So, sometimes, I will give you guys some extra lessons. However, you are right to be worried that such knowledge could bring you guys trouble. So let me help you out. Then, Edward took out his wand, and with a wave of it, a silvery white light as thin as a finger traveled from his wand and entered the heads of Hermione, Ron, Harry and Hagrid. Suddenly, they felt like something in their mind was protected, like a lock was placed on their minds. With this spell, I have placed a lock on your memories regarding what I have spoken about tonight. With this, although you guys will not forget what happened today, it will be impossible for you to tell a second person. Every time you wish to do so, you will instantly forget about the information, before it returns to your mind a few hours later. On top of that, no wizard can use legilimency to spy on your mind and read that particular knowledge. All of them nodded, but there was no awe on their faces. With these people's knowledge, they could not possibly fathom how difficult such a spell actually was. This spell was basically an application of Fidelius charm that which allows one person to place a secret deep inside a person's soul. Edward modified it so that it locked a specific secret inside a person's mind, then used Obliviate to erase that secret temporarily when a certain condition is met. And that condition is when the person wants to reveal the secret. This is a perfect way to keep a secret without harming the person keeping the secret. If Edward wanted, he could set up this spell to instead kill the person who decided to reveal the secret. As a matter of fact, this was the purpose that he invented the spell in the first place. After everything was done, Edward then finally asked, "Why did you guys call me here again?" It was then that everybody remembered the reason that they contacted Edward in the first place. So, they explained to him the situation, and even mentioned how Malfoy learned about this incident a few days ago. After hearing this, Edward's first reaction was to just give him the same plans as in the original canon timeline. After all, he had decided not to mess with the original plot as much as possible. However, a sudden thought came to Edward's mind. He asked himself why he was so fixed up on preserving the original plot so much. At first he thought it was because he wanted to use it to his advantage, but after thinking deeper, Edward realized that this was more of a psychological issue. Knowing what is going to happen gave him a sense of security. It made all the future danger meaningless as he could already predict it. And on a deeper level, this sense of security is also the result of his parents' death when he was young. Despite knowing their fate, despite warning constantly of the danger, they still died. On some level, Edward blamed himself for not being able to save them. He made himself believe that trying to change the plot is futile as the power of fate is inevitable. However, Edward realized that his thinking was based on his weak ability. He is currently one of the most powerful wizards alive in the modern time. And by the time he finishes his body modification, the #1 title would become his without a doubt. So, why would he care about changing the future? Why would he need to slowly plot for the things he wants when there are more direct ways to acquire them? After coming to this realization, Edward suddenly felt relieved, like a heavy burden was lifted from his mind. He took a deep breath, and decided to stop acting so cautiously from now on. He then looked at Hagrid before saying, "I will create a briefcase for you just like mine and Newt for you to raise Norberta properly. As for the license to raise him, I will get one for you from the ministry." Hagrid became excited after hearing this and he wanted to hug Edward to thank him, but he remembered when Edward taught him a lesson back in school and warned him about using his brute force to hug ordinary people. So he stopped and smiled awkwardly. After a brief chat, all the people left the shack and went to do their own thing. Underscore 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 underscore. In the next 2 chapters, year 1 will be finally over, and Edward can focus on his own research, so look forwards to it. HP pickup line. My name may not be Luna, but I sure know how to love good. Chapter 50. Philosopher's Stone. You are listening at novelfull.audio. If you are interested in reading 10 chapters ahead, go check out my Patreon with the link https://www.patreon.com/lazysagedao, or just type in my writer's name in the website. The plot is getting exciting there and you guys can support me in any way you can. Additionally, go read my other novel, Journey of the Fate-Destroying Emperor, and join the Discord. https://discord.gg/princesstapy. Underscore 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 underscore. Time soon passed and it was already the end of the year. Edward made sure that every student in his class could pass at least the written part of his alchemy exam. And how did he do such a thing? By using magic to force the knowledge in the students that were failing his class. Although these students spent an entire week with a terrible headache, they still learned something. As for the practical aspect of the class, he could not help them. He has provided these people with plenty of practice opportunities, and even offered them tutoring classes during the weekend. So, it's not his problem if they could not pass the class after doing so much. One odd thing that happened during that time was the fact that despite his intervention, Harry Potter still got detention and sent to the Forbidden Forest. After that event, Edward theorized that maybe the power of fate exists in this world, and has a correctional force that pushes events to the original timeline after being meddled with. So, he decided to test out this theory at a later date. At the end of the year, Edward used his own Marauders map to track the Gryffindor trio, Quirrell and Dumbledore. So, when the final event of the year occurred. So when Hermione, Harry and Ron ran into the room in the third flood after Dumbledore left, Edward placed an invisibility spell on him. Instead of a disillusionment charm. And followed them. This spell was inspired by the Weasley twins' headless hats. He watched how the trio went through all the obstacles placed by different teachers. Whether it was Hagrid's Fluffy, Professor Sprout's Devil Snare, Professor Flitwick's Flying Keys, Professor Minerva's Chess Game, Professor Quirrell's Troll, and Snape's Potions Riddle. Edward followed them all the way without notifying them, alerting them, or intervening with their actions. Throughout the entire process, he was just thinking why he was not invited to design an obstacle of his own. In some way, he was a little bitter despite the fact that many other professors were also like him and did not design an obstacle of their own. After everything went according to the original timeline, Edward took the Philosopher's Stone from the ground after Harry dropped it. His eyes turned purple as he used his alchemy eye spell to examine it. After a few minutes of examination, he said out loud, "I was right. The Philosopher's Stone is a highly condensed form of magic power bound by countless souls. Magic is an energy that is almost omnipotent. As long as you have enough of it, you can do almost anything with the proper knowledge. And this stone has an almost limitless amount of magical energy or magic power. It is the reason that it can use permanent transfiguration and turn metals into pure gold, and even break Gamp's law of elemental transfiguration. As for the elixir of immortality, it should be a combination of liquefied magical power combined with the power of the soul. Most wizards have a very long lifespan compared to muggles due to the magic power inside their cores. The elixir of the stone can indefinitely prolong life by nourishing the body with magic power and further strengthen the soul. However, it cannot prevent aging. In my opinion, using the Philosopher's Stone only in this way is quite wasteful of such a magical wonder, wouldn't you agree, Professor?" As soon as Edward said these last words, Dumbledore appeared inside the room while secretly holding his wand. "And how should the stone be used properly?" asked Dumbledore while his calm eyes looked at Edward. However, despite his calmness, he still moved closer to Harry on the ground. However, Edward ignored his action as he continued to analyze the stone. But he still answered the question. "Like I said, this stone is an almost unlimited form of clean energy. Wizards can do anything with it, build an entire civilization based on its energy. Whether it is the advancement of magical technology, curing diseases, exploring space, solving world hunger. The stone can be the blueprint to accomplish all these tasks. Muggle scientists would do anything to have access to such an energy source. Well, if each country did not kill each other for it." "You may be correct, Edward," replied Dumbledore calmly. "It does not change the fact that countless lives or souls were used to make such a small stone. How many people do you think would be killed when creating so many stones to power your so-called magical civilization?" Edward shook his head, always the pedantic, Professor. "Wizards does not need to kill so many people to create a stone, just use the same method that Mr. Flamel probably used. Take the souls of muggles that have died. It is better to recycle them and place them to better use than to let death have them anyway. And if that is still morally unacceptable to many wizards, they can still try to find a different solution. Souls are only used to bind the magic power in the stone, they can try to find a different binding agent. For example, emotions. Many young wizards have their first magic riot after an intense burst of emotions, so it is proven that emotions can easily bind or guide magic power. So, it is the perfect thing to use as a catalyst to create Philosopher's Stones." Dumbledore sighed after hearing Edward's explanation, as he had to acknowledge that this young wizard in front was not only a powerful one, but also a forward-thinking one. However, he could not agree with his sometimes utilitarian mentality. After Edward finished analyzing the stone, he calmly threw it back to Dumbledore before saying, "Since I know how to make my own, you do not need to worry about me taking it. However, I would appreciate it if you could tell Mr. Flamel my address, as I would greatly appreciate a communication between the two of us. After all, as the most knowledgeable grand alchemist still existing, it would be a shame for him to die without passing on his knowledge or legacy." After saying that, Edward walked away calmly. Meanwhile, Dumbledore had a frown on his face as he held the stone in his hand. He looked at the departing back of Edward, sighed before going to check on Harry. As for Edward, he also sighed in relief after exiting the chamber where everything took place. He was ready at any time to either fight or run away. In the past month, he had discovered that the reason that house.elves can teleport anywhere was because their magic powers had a different frequency than humans, thus making them operating under different rules. After a little training, he could also apparate in some places with anti-apparition enchantments. Just like house.elves. On top of that, the alchemy item that can allow him to use his gate was ready to be used at any given moment. The truth of the matter is Edward was not ready to become enemies with Dumbledore. Despite the fact that he would probably be the final winner if he decided to use all the dark magic that he knows. And it seemed that Dumbledore had similar thought as him. Year 1 is over, and the plot is beginning to take shape. From now on, this is Edward's story with Harry Potter's characters in it. Pickup line. Have you heard of Platform 9 and March 4th? Well, I can think of something else with the exact same measurements.